Okay, so far we've been talking about writing task 2 or writing for task 2. We've discussed different kinds of essays. We talked about problems and solutions essays, and disagree or agree and disagree essays, and also we talked about advantages and disadvantages essays. Another common type of essays for the IELTS exam is called a two-question essay. Of course, as the name implies, you get two questions to answer in one essay. In today's lesson, inshallah, we will talk about how you can organize the structure of your essay, and we will also see two different examples. One is a bit easier than the other one. Okay, so let's begin with a note as usual. Another common essay type that you might have at the IELTS exam is the two-question essay. The task asks you to answer two related questions. For example, the first question might ask you to discuss, it should read to discuss, not discusses, obviously, it's the infinitive. I made a mistake, I'm sorry. The causes, problems, or reasons behind a situation. And the second question might ask you to give your opinion or to say how much you agree with the statement. So the first question could be about maybe causes of a problem, maybe about problems, maybe about reasons. Okay. And the second question could ask you about your opinion. Okay. It's like a mixed essay. Okay. Maybe the disadvantages of something. The second question could ask you about the disadvantages of something or the solution, how we can solve this problem. So we have a problem. Then the first question could ask you about the causes of the problem. 1, 2, 3. I have 3 causes. Okay. And the second question should ask you about the disadvantage of something or the solutions and so on. We are going to see examples. Just something that you need to be aware of. You need to divide your essay in paragraphs. Of course, you start with the introduction, as we are going to see, then answer the first question, might be about causes or problems, and in one paragraph, then another paragraph for the second question, might be about your opinion, and your conclusion in one paragraph. So we have here 4 paragraphs: introduction, answering the first question, or a paragraph for the first question, a second paragraph to answer the second question, and your conclusion. You should be aware that there's something that you need to think about or consider for a minute. Don't spend too much time focusing on one of the 2 questions. Some people just focus on one question and they write the whole essay about one question, and they lose lots of marks, honestly. You don't need, actually, you shouldn't need to do that. Don't do that. Okay? Try to focus on, try to give yourself maybe 7 minutes to answer each question in one paragraph. Some time for introduction and some time for your conclusion. Okay, so we are going to talk about all that. Actually, we have 2 examples here. So this is the logical structure. In simple words, the introduction rephrases the question, as we have seen many times before, and tells what the essay will discuss or talk about. You have to say what the essay will be about. Your readers, or the examiner in this case, because you're writing for the IELTS exam, of course, has to understand from the introduction what the essay will be about. Okay, so then you have your first paragraph. The first paragraph answers the first question, then the second paragraph that will answer the second question, and your conclusion. The conclusion will summarize the whole discussion. Okay, so let's look at the first question, or because we are going to see 2 examples in this lesson. Many wild animals have become endangered. Why has this happened? What can governments do to stop this from continuing to happen? So, as you can see, why has this happened? Of course, it says write at least 250 words. This is obvious. Why has this happened? I want to talk about the reasons and what can government do to stop this from happening or from continuing to happen. I'm going to talk about solutions. Okay, so reasons and solutions, causes and solutions. Okay, problems and solutions, and so on. Okay, for this specific essay. Now, let's look at some steps that you need to understand before we start writing or talking about the example itself. Write an introduction that rephrases the question. Don't use the same exact words. We've been talking about this since we started talking about task 2, actually, or even task 1. Don't use the same exact words and in the question. Don't, if we go back for a minute, the question, don't use the words many wild animals and have become endangered. Don't use this sentence, many wild animals have become endangered. Don't use the same exact words. Think about alternatives, synonyms, paraphrases. Okay. And of course, your introduction should say what the essay will be about. 2, understand the questions and answer them with examples in separate paragraphs. You have to understand the questions. You have to analyze the questions, because the question could be sometimes tricky, and you need to spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes trying to read the questions, underline the most important keywords in the questions, and try to figure out what the question is asking from you. Is the question asking you to write about reasons? Maybe about the problems themselves, not the reasons behind them. And what about the second question? Maybe it's asking you about your opinion, most obviously, but sometimes it can ask you about something different. So you have to read the questions very carefully. 3, if the first question is asking you to write about the causes of the problem, then you must discuss 2 to 3 causes. 2-3 causes are enough. Actually, 2 would be fine. The second question might ask you about your opinion or maybe solutions to the problem. Both are different things, obviously, and it's crucial that you read the question carefully, understand what you need to do. If it's asking about solutions and you give your opinion, you write a paragraph about your opinion, then you are going to lose marks. Okay, you have to answer the questions. That's it. Your conclusion should not introduce any new ideas. We've been talking about this many times. Okay, for many times, I mean. It should answer both questions using different words and phrases, of course. So we need to see examples. Okay. So before you start writing or typing anything, you need to think about or come up with a plan for this question. Okay, for the introduction, we said that it rephrases the question and mention what the essay will discuss. This is fine, and it's really easy to write. Paragraph 1, it talks about the causes. So hunting for sport, this could be one of the reasons or causes. Destroying natural habitats, and finally pollution. So as you can see, I'm going to discuss 3 causes for the problem. Okay, why animals are dying out. Okay, so because we hunt them for sport, we as species, as humans, destroying natural habitats, and finally pollution. Okay, paragraph 2 talks about the solutions. This is what the question wants me to discuss. Making laws that forbid hunting, destroying natural habitats, and dumping toxic material or materials into the ocean. And the conclusion summarizes paragraph 1 and 2 and give a statement. Okay, so let's take another note before we begin. Sorry about that. When you're writing within a time limit and under exam conditions, it's easy to make silly errors. It's important, therefore, to spend the last few minutes checking through what you've written so you don't lose marks unnecessarily. In order to check your work properly, you need to consider these things, and you need to start doing this as you are practicing for the exam, because you should be practicing right now. Okay, punctuation, grammar, spelling, word count, and handwriting. If you are going for the computerized version of the exam, then you have to type fast, actually. Anyway, punctuation, have you used full stops, capital letters, and commas appropriately? Okay, maybe you are connecting two independent clauses into one compound sentence using a semicolon, or maybe a semicolon and an adverb and a comma, like however or as a result. Okay, maybe you are connecting them with one of the fanboys. Okay, so it's preceded by a comma. Grammar: have you used the correct tenses and the correct prepositions? Maybe you are using you have to think about the tenses that you are using. If something has an effect in the present time, I could be using the present perfect simple, not the past simple, like in this essay, of course, because using the past simple would mean that this has nothing to do with the present time. Okay, and it could be a mistake, of course. Spelling: are all the words spelled correctly? Okay. Word count: actually, have you written at least 250 words? It's quicker to count lines, not words. Okay, so if you usually write maybe 7 or 8 words per line, then you can count lines, not words. Okay, of course you don't have time to count every word, and you want to think about the structure and the expressions you are going to write, not the count. Okay, not how many words are you going to write. Anyway, handwriting: is your handwriting clear? Which is a problem, of course. If it's not, are there any words which are not clear and need rewriting? Okay, so you have to consider these 5 areas. Okay, now let's look at the question and the essay. Many wild animals have become endangered. Why has this happened? Oh, it's the first question. What can government do to stop this from continuing to happen? So this is a 2-question essay. And I need to start with the statement, many wild animals have become endangered. I need to use this statement to write my introduction. Remember, you have to rephrase the question. By the question, I mean this sentence. Many wildlife, I didn't say many wild animals. I changed it a bit. I said many wildlife species are threatened by extinction. Threatened by extinction. I didn't use the expression become endangered. Okay. I mean, if you are maybe stressed and you have nothing on your mind to replace this expression, you can use it. What else could you do? Okay. Because there's nothing else you can do here. So you could use this expression. Okay. Many wildlife species are threatened by extinction. And then I defined the expression threatened by extinction and said disappearing from the world forever. And then I give an example. For example, this is my introduction. I'm introducing the topic. It's an introduction to the topic. The number of animals such as black rhinos and orangutans has declined. Has, of course, because it's the number. Subject-verb agreement. You can't say have declined. Okay, it's the number. Gradually in the last 4 years. Furthermore, the first cohesive device here, sea animals like whales are also at risk. In this essay, now I'm going to be talking about or discussing what the essay will talk about, okay, or mentioning what the essay will discuss, okay. In this essay, I will look at, of course, don't use contractions. Don't say I'll look. We don't use contractions for academic writing or in academic writing. I mean, I will look at some of the causes of this decline, and this is a compound noun, compound sentence. I'm sorry. And I will then move on to consider what measures can governments take to deal with the problem. So it's like a hint for the 2 questions in this essay. I will talk about question 1. I will look at some of the causes of this decline. And then I will talk about question 2. I will then move on to consider what measures can governments take to deal with the problem. Okay. Now for the first paragraph, I have to use, of course, to introduce the reasons, expressions like the first apparent reason or the first reason. And then I need to give an example for the first reason, then another reason, okay, and then I use the expression one example of this would be, and a third reason for the problem is, then I give a piece of fact, okay, according to professors at the University of Georgia. So this is how you can structure your paragraph successfully. I need to discuss 3 reasons for the problem. So I used the first apparent reason, okay, then another reason for this endangerment, then a third reason for the problem is, okay. So you could say, you could use the first reason, the second reason, the third reason, but I keep telling you that you need to avoid repetition. You need to use different expressions, okay. Don't use the same exact expressions, okay. So after your first reason, or after I gave my first reason, I give an example. For example, then as we are going to see now, and then after the second reason, I give an example. And after the third reason, this time I didn't give an example, I give a piece of information, a piece of a fact. I give a fact, okay? So let's read the paragraph. Human activity is clearly the first apparent reason some animals become in danger of extinction. I didn't say become endangered. I didn't say threatened by extinction, because I don't want to repeat the same words, okay? I said become in danger of extinction. Okay, they practically mean the same thing, or nearly the same thing. Become endangered, threatened by extinction, or in danger of extinction. People have hunted animals for sport or their fur, horns, or other body parts. For example, they hunted tigers for their bones, used for medicinal purposes. Okay, this is a collocation, of course, a good one. Another reason for this endangerment is the loss of habitat. Not only are humans hunting animals, but we have also been destroying the natural habitat that they need to survive. So this is the second reason. We are destroying their natural habitat. One example of this would be the gorillas in the rainforests losing their home because we are destroying their home. A third reason for the problem is pollution. According to professors at the University of Georgia, China and Indonesia are the world's largest sources of plastic waste reaching the ocean. As a result, now I'm building a compound sentence. Fish, seabirds, turtles, and marine mammals can become entangled in or ingest plastic debris, causing suffocation, starvation, and drowning. Okay, so this is the paragraph, 3 causes of animals becoming in danger of extinction. Okay, and I give 2 examples, one for first and for the second, for the first and second reasons, and I give a fact for the third one. Okay, now we need to move on to the solutions. If we go back to the plan, the second paragraph talks about solutions, making laws that forbid hunting, destroying natural habitats, and dumping waste or toxic materials into the ocean. So these are the solutions. Okay, of course you could come up with a different solution to each problem, and you can do that. Okay, this is not by far the best essay for this question, of course. It's just an example. Governments worldwide can help with the problem of the decline of various animals due to human exploitation and habitat destruction. Firstly, I'm going to be talking about the first solution, okay? And I said governments worldwide can help with these problems. How? Firstly, they should enact laws to criminalize. It comes from criminals, of course, or crimes. Okay, this is a verb. Criminalize hunting animals, especially endangered species. Secondly, governments should find methods to regulate housing and industry development in the natural habitats for those animals. We can't just go ahead and destroy their rainforests or their natural habitat. Okay, so governments everywhere have to regulate this. Finally, governments and organizations need to find alternatives to the practice of dumping plastic and other, because it's becoming a practice, right? A habit. Dumping plastic and other pollutants into the oceans. So government and organizations need to find, or should find, or must find, actually, it's even better to use the modal verb must, alternatives. They need to find alternatives. Okay, and actually can write a sentence and suggest an alternative. How? Okay, it's even better. Now let's move on to the conclusion. So in conclusion, we can say that the main threats that animals face are mainly a result of human impacts on the environment. I didn't use the same exact words. Okay, in your conclusion, you have to summarize the two questions, or I mean your two answers, to be more specific. Okay, so here I said that we can say that the main threats, I'm talking about the causes, of course, that animals face are mainly a result of human impacts on the environment. Therefore, the solution is still in our grasp as the dominant species on this planet. Therefore, of course, you could replace therefore here with something else. It's highly recommended, actually. Everyone must work together to save those animals that are in danger of disappearing from the face of the earth. Okay, so here I made a statement, okay, that we should all work together to save those endangered species. Okay, but I used here, I didn't use the same exact expression, because here in the previous paragraph I used especially endangered species. Here I used the expression to save those animals that are in danger of disappearing from the face of the earth. Okay, so as you can see, the conclusion summarizes the whole essay. It summarizes the first question. Okay, we can say that the main threats that animals face are mainly a result of human impacts on the environment. So it's the causes is us, human activity. I didn't use the same expression. I didn't use the expression human activity. I said a result of human impacts on the environment, which practically this expression means human activity. Therefore, the solution is still in our grasp as the dominant species on this planet. Okay, because actually I'm summarizing the solutions. The solutions are in our hand as the dominant species on this planet. Okay. Of course, we could replace therefore here with another cohesive device. Everyone must work together to save those. I mean, to avoid repetition, because here we have used it to make a compound sentence. Everyone must work together to save those animals that are in danger of disappearing from the face of the earth. So now we're done with our first actually easy example. Okay. Here we have the introduction, the first paragraph for the first question, the causes, then the second paragraph for the solutions, and your conclusion. Okay, your conclusion is like a summary of the previous two paragraphs. Okay, remember that you need to sometimes if one of these questions is asking you about your opinion, you need to give your opinion in the introduction. We're going to see an example. Okay. Okay, another question. Social media has completely changed the way family and friends communicate with each other. What are the reasons for this? Is this a positive or negative development? This is a bit more difficult than the previous question. And you need to give yourself 5 minutes to think about the question. Okay, just give yourself 5 minutes to think about the question and try to consider or think about the what type of paragraphs you need to write. Is the first paragraph about maybe writing only the reasons? What about the second question? Is this a positive or negative development? If you say this is a positive development, then you are actually giving your opinion, right? I want you to just pause the video and try to take maybe an hour if you would like, and try to write, or actually write, don't try, just write an essay. Okay. Of course, this will be some sort of an exercise, okay, but it will be very beneficial, okay, or it will be beneficial. So I want you to pause the video and come back when you're done. Okay, take an hour, it's fine. Now let's talk about this essay. Okay, here we have the question. Of course, I underlined the most important keyword: social media completely changed the way family and friends communicate. What reasons? Is positive, negative, development? This is what I need to discuss. Okay, now here's the essay, and we have 4 questions. Social media was introduced to the internet around 20 years ago. It has since gone from strength to strength. Many people initially dismissed social media as a passing fashion. They believed that it would never replace face-to-face communication. There are many downsides to this development, but I believe that overall it has had a positive effect on our lives. One of the main reasons, I want you to pause the video and try to read this essay a few times, and then we will move on to answer these 4 questions. The first question: does the writer make their position on the statement clear? Did the writer answer the first question correctly? In this paragraph, of course, in the first paragraph after the introduction. Did the writer answer the second question correctly? In this paragraph, obviously, in my opinion, the increasing popularity of social media is a positive development. And the last question: does the conclusion summarize the essay correctly? I want you to answer these questions. You need to analyze this essay line by line, honestly, and take as much time as you need. Okay, now let's do just that. Let's answer these questions. The first question: does the writer make their position on the statement clear? Not entirely. The writer makes it clear they believe social media to have had a positive effect. However, they don't answer the question that has been given. As a result, the position they state relates to their argument, but not to the one that they should be writing about. Okay, this is a big problem. Some people just do not fully understand, or don't try to fully understand the question. You need to underline the most important keywords and analyze the question. Okay, what you are being asked to write about. This is very important. Okay, here the writer doesn't actually make their position on the statement clear. Okay, so what about the second question? We are going to see how to write this essay anyway, but I want you to look at this paragraph. One of the main reasons why social media websites are so popular is that they are a very convenient way of contacting friends and family. So this is a good start, okay? Because it seems that the writer will be talking about family and friends and how to communicate with them through social media, okay? Because it changed everything, okay? Now, at the touch, not the tough, I'm sorry, it's a mistake. It should read touch. At the touch of a button, it's possible to communicate with somebody you are close to on the other side of the world. In the past, people were able to speak to each other on telephone, but they had to make sure that they were both at home and make or answer the call at an agreed time. Furthermore, if someone is a fan of a certain actor or singer, they can easily message that person and tell them so. In return, the fans can get updates on the films or songs the actors or singers are planning to release next. So this is a huge change from the way this communication happened in the past. Okay, let's read the question. Did the writer answer the first question correctly? Obviously, the answer is no, because actually the writer begins very well, okay, with the first sentence, by describing how it's become easier for people to communicate at any time of the day. Then the writer goes on to state what they see as a second reason for the usefulness or benefits of social media, but it doesn't actually relate to the question at all. Okay, the question focuses on relationship between family and friends, not performers, not singers and actors, okay, and their fans. Okay, so this is a mistake. You need to, every sentence in the paragraph should be related to each other, of course, and to the topic sentence of the paragraph, because this paragraph is about the reasons that social media has completely changed the way family and friends communicate with each other, not fans communicating with actors or celebrities in general. No, this isn't the question. Okay, let's do the same for the second question. Did the writer answer the second question correctly? Let's see. The question says, is this a positive or negative development? This is the question, the second question. In my opinion, the increasing popularity of social media is a positive development. It allows everyone to stay in touch constantly, even though it's not in person. For example, if a young person decides to stay out late, they can just phone their parents and let them know. In the past, they would have needed to find a telephone box or booth, actually, and to have the correct change to be able to make a call. And this may have caused their parents to worry. So did the writer answer the second question correctly? I don't think so, no. The example that the writer gives here in this paragraph doesn't actually relate at all to the question. Rather than explaining how useful social media is in strengthening the relationships between family and friends, the writer actually chose to talk about the usefulness of owning a mobile phone. Okay, the advantages of owning a mobile phone. Okay, or actually the disadvantages of not having social media or smartphones. Okay, so this has nothing to do with the question. You have to talk about, you have to use an example that answers the question. Okay, let's move on to the conclusion. Does the conclusion summarize the essay correctly? In conclusion, social media has a number of negative sides, but overall, it's a positive development. I would recommend that everyone has at least one account that they use every day. So, does the conclusion summarize the essay correctly? If you compare this conclusion to the previous essay's conclusion, I mean, the previous one we discussed, your answer will be no. The writer mentioned that there are negative sides in both the introduction and the conclusion, but the main body of the essay only discusses the positives. In any essay of this length, especially one that has two questions to answer, it's difficult to go into a great amount of detail. However, if you are going to state that there are negatives, you should aim at least to suggest what they are. Additionally, the candidate, or the writer in this case, recommends a course of action for everyone to take, but this is not asked for in the question. So this conclusion doesn't summarize the whole essay, at least correctly, no. Okay. We said before that you shouldn't try to introduce any new ideas in the conclusion. So the paragraphs, the actual main body of the essay, doesn't discuss the negative sides at all. Okay, but he mentions, he or she, of course, or they mention in the conclusion that there are a number of negative sides, which is a mistake. Don't do that. Your summary should summarize your summary, yes, your conclusion, I'm sorry, should summarize the whole essay. Okay, it should summarize or talk about the things that you mentioned in the main body. Okay, so this is another note before we continue. If you only write short sample sentences in the IELTS essay, I mean for the exam, you will not achieve a high score in the grammatical range and accuracy. Okay, even if there aren't any mistakes. So to score well or to have a good score, you will need to show that you can correctly write more complex sentences. Complex, compound. Actually, I wouldn't ask you to write compound complex, but if you can do this, or if you can do that, it's going to be really great. Okay. So complex sentences are typically ones that combine two or more sentences or clauses into one, often using grammatical or discourse markers. I want you to study lessons 65 to 71 from the intermediate course, because in these lessons we talked about how you can structure compound sentences, complex sentences, compound complex sentences, how you can use defining and non-defining relative clauses, and the common mistakes that students usually do while they write sentences. Okay, let's continue with this essay. Okay, now read the first half of another answer based on the previous task about the question about social media. Find the two sentences in the second paragraph that use discourse markers of contrast and concession. So in the second paragraph, we have two actually discourse markers of contrast and concession. And these two are used to make compound and complex sentences. I want you to pause the video and read the introduction in the first paragraph, actually, and try to find these two discourse markers. Okay. The first paragraph, the introduction, says, first introduced to the internet around 20 years ago, social media has since gone from strength to strength. Many critics have suggested that it's affecting the closeness of family relationships, arguing that people spend too much time staring at screens rather than actually talking to each other. I believe that that it brings more advantages than disadvantages to our lives. So this is how you write the introduction. It introduces the topic, not using the same, of course, exact words. We use different expressions. And because it's asking about your opinion, here it says, I believe that it brings more advantages than disadvantages to our lives, because you are going to be writing a paragraph about your opinion. The first paragraph here, let's go back to the question one more time. What are the reasons for this? So the first paragraph should be about the reasons for social media dominating our lives. Okay. One of the main reasons why social media has had such, of course, this is using the present perfect simple, because this happened in the past and it still has an effect on the present time. One of the main reasons why social media has had such an effect is that it does not require a great deal of effort or planning to connect with friends and family. So this is one of the main reasons. Now I'm going to be writing a supporting sentence for this one. In the past, people were able to talk to each other on the phone, but they had to make sure that they were both at home to make or answer the call at an agreed time. Another reason is that, okay, so I used another expression to introduce the second reason. Another reason is that it fulfills our basic need for human contact, even between people who are on the other side of the world to each other. Despite the fact that people need to communicate regularly with their loved ones in order to be happy, it appears that physical contact is not as vital as once thought. Evidence suggests that contentment in relationships can actually be achieved through social media. Okay, so now I need to come up with find the two cohesive devices or discourse markers. Okay, as you can see, here we have despite the fact. Despite, of course, is a cohesive device or a discourse marker, and we have another one here, but is used to create a compound sentence, and despite is used to create a complex sentence. Okay, so now we need to just take or practice using despite which of the phrases below are grammatically correct? Paraphrases of the underlined part of this sentence from paragraph 2. So this is a sentence from paragraph 2, and we need to know which one of these three phrases are grammatically correct. Okay, despite the fact that people need to communicate regularly with their loved ones in order to be happy, it appears that physical contact is not as vital as once thought. Is it 1, 2, or 3? Despite people needing to communicate regularly with their loved ones, or despite people need to communicate, or despite people's need to communicate? Which one of these, or maybe the three of them, are correct? All right, okay. I want you to pause the video and try to figure this out on your own and come back when you're done. Okay. Now let's move on to the following slide. The answer is 1 and 3. We could say despite people needing, because despite could be followed by a noun, then verb with ing, or 3, despite people's need. It's a noun, despite people's need to communicate. But we cannot, but number 2, of course, is a mistake. It's a grammatical mistake. We don't say despite people need to communicate. Despite people's need to communicate, okay? Or despite people needing to communicate. Either one is fine, okay? So this is, actually, we are talking about how you can create a complex sentence using despite. Okay, now, which sentences are grammatically correct? We need to read these 4 sentences. Of course, these are, it's taken from the, actually this sentence, in the past, people were able to talk to each other on the phone, but they had to make sure that they were both at home to make or answer the call at an agreed time. This is taken from the essay. And then we need to look at sentences 1 to 4 below here, which are paraphrases of it. Decide if they are grammatically correct, and if not, make any changes so that they are correct. Okay, now we need to read these 4 sentences. Okay, in the past, although people were able to talk to each other on the phone, but they had to make sure that they were both at home to make or answer the call at an agreed time. 2, in the past, although the ability to talk to each other on the phone, people had to make sure they were both at home to make or answer the call at an agreed time. 3, in the past, despite able to talk to each other on the phone, people had to make sure that they were both at home to make or answer the call at an agreed time. 4, in the past, although able to talk to each other on the phone, and so on. Okay, so which of these are correct and which of these are incorrect? Which are which? Okay, so I want you to pause the video, and I want you to take as much time as you need to figure this out and come back when you're done. Okay, now let's look at the answer. Okay, the first one. In the past, although people were able to talk to each other on the phone, but they had to make sure that they were both at home and to make or answer the call at an agreed time. It's incorrect. If you read the first part of the sentence, although people were able to talk to each other on the phone, you might think that it's fine. Why it's incorrect? It's fine. Okay. But here we've used although in the first part of in the first clause, and in the second clause we used but. Okay. Actually, they have the same function, so you can't have both at the same sentence. Okay, or you shouldn't. So you can just correct the sentence by removing but. It should read, in the past, although people were able to talk to each other on the phone, comma, remove but from the sentence, they had to make sure blah blah blah, and so on. 2, in the past, although the ability to talk to each other on the phone, people had to make sure that they were both at home to make or answer the call at an agreed time. It's incorrect, because although is usually followed by a normal sentence structure, subject and verb. The only exception is in sentence 4 anyway. So the corrected versions could be, in the past, although the ability to talk to each other on the phone was available, people had to make sure, or in the past, although they had the ability, okay, or in the past, although people had the ability. So either one is fine of these. Okay, I could say in the past, although the ability to talk to each other on the phone was available, or in the past, although they had the ability, the subject, then the verb, or I could replace they with people. People had the ability. Okay. 3, in the past, despite able to talk to each other. It's incorrect because despite can be used with the following structures. Despite the fact that, we could say despite the fact that, as you can read in sentence 3 here, despite the fact that, or despite, then followed by verb with an ing, or despite with a noun phrase, no verb. So corrected version in this case could be in the past, despite being able, despite being able. 4, in the past, although able to talk to each other on the phone, people had to make sure that they were both at home and make or answer the call at an agreed time. This is correct if both clauses have the same subject. In this case, people, because the same subject the subject is the same for both clauses. And the word although is followed by an adjective or past participle. It's not essential to have the subject in both clauses. For example, although they are, okay, this is not actually in the sentence, although concerned about how much time their children spend online, parents tend not to impose a time limit on them. Okay, so this is fine. You could just, these two clauses have the same subject. Parents, and here they are. So I could remove they are, it's fine. Although concerned about how much time their children spend online. So far, you don't know who we're talking about. We are missing the subject, but the second clause makes it clear. Parents tend not to impose a time limit on them. Okay, now an exercise, write complete sentences using despite or although. Here you have 3 examples, and of course, more than one answer could be possible. So I want you to pause the video, get a piece of paper and a pen and try, or a pencil, and try to do this exercise on your own. Write 1 or maybe 2 possibilities, or 2 possible answers. Okay, and come back when you're done. Now let's look at the answers. The first sentence says Wi-Fi technology is cheaper than ever. Then, of course, it's not a complete sentence. Certain parts of the world still have no internet access. So I could use despite and I could use although. The first sentence says, despite Wi-Fi technology being cheaper than ever, comma, you have to use the comma. It's a must. You have to use the comma, okay? Certain parts of the world still have no internet access. Or I could say, despite the fact that Wi-Fi technology is cheaper than ever, certain parts of the world still have no internet access. I could use although. Although Wi-Fi technology is cheaper than ever, comma, certain parts of the world still have no internet access. 2, virtual reality headsets are now available to buy. Most home computers lack the processing power to make them worthwhile. I could use also despite and although. Despite the fact that virtual reality headsets are not available to buy, or I could say despite virtual reality headsets being now available to buy. And I could use although, as we said, although virtual reality headsets are now available to buy, comma, most home computers lack the processing power to make them worthwhile. The last sentence, pieces of a sentence actually, it's extremely important to learn science at school. Some students are better suited to studying arts subjects. So I could connect these 2 clauses to form a complex sentence. Although it's extremely important to learn science at school, some students are better suited to studying art subjects, despite the fact, or despite it being extremely important to learn science at school, some students are better suited to studying art subjects. So you could use although or despite. Okay, despite is followed by the noun, despite the fact, or despite um, um, the subject then being. Okay, you could use it or the subject itself, the noun, despite Wi-Fi technology being cheaper or despite it being cheaper. Okay, but if you use it, you have to here, let's read this sentence. It's extremely important to learn science at school. Here, if I use it, despite it being extremely important to learn science at school, here you have to use the verb, the infinitive plus the noun, okay, in order for the sentence to make sense, okay. Okay, we have something else you need to understand before we go any further in the lesson. It's called participle clauses. These participle clauses, they combine two sentences or clauses, both of which share the same subject and make a single sentence. They use the present participle of a main verb for active sentences and the past participle or third form for passive sentences. They can perform a number of different functions, such as giving background information, reasons, results, or conditions. And of course, if you use them correctly, it will help you, or they will help you improve your grammatical range and accuracy score. So let's talk about that for a bit. Okay, here I have two sentences, and then they are converted, or we use the participle clauses in these sentences. The first one says, social media was first introduced to the internet around 20 years ago. This is the first. Then the second sentence, it has since gone from strength to strength. We could make some changes to these two sentences to form one sentence using participle clause, a participle clause. Here it says first introduced to the internet around 20 years ago. It has since gone from strength to strength. The subject of both the original sentences is the same. Okay, here we have social media and here we have it. It refers back to social media, of course. Okay, so the subject is the same. And the verb in the first sentence is passive. So we have used a past participle clause to connect the two sentences. The words social media was first introduced have been edited to form first introduced only, while the subject social media has been moved to replace it, the subject of the second clause. And if the subject had been left as it, the reader would not know what was being discussed. So to use participle clause, you have to remove the subject, which is here, of course, is the words or the expression social media. Okay, we removed it with the verb and just used first introduced. This is the participle clause. First introduced, of course, you don't, so far, if we read the first clause, first introduced to the internet around 20 years ago, so far you don't know what we're talking about. It has since gone from strength to strength. It refers back to what is being discussed in the first clause. Okay. Of course, it's part of the whole introduction. The second set of sentences, many critics have suggested that it's affecting the closeness of family relationships. They, of course, they refers as a subject of the second sentence, refers back to critics. They argue that people spend too much time staring at screens rather than actually talking to each other. You could make one complex sentence using the participle clause. Okay, you could say something like, many critics have suggested that it's affecting the closeness of family relationships, arguing that people spend too much time staring at screens rather than actually talking to each other. So the subject is also the same for the two sentences, the original sentences, many critics, and here they. So the subject is the same. They refers back to many critics. And the second sentence suggests the reason for the first, of course, with an active verb. It's not the passive. That's why we can join these two sentences with a comma and a present participle clause, replacing the words they argue with arguing. We replace they argue with arguing. Okay. And the presence of the comma is all important here. It's crucial. You have to use the comma. Okay. So in case of the passive, we used first introduced, not was first introduced. And in case of the active verb, we used arguing, not they argue. Okay, so we created one. I mean, there is nothing wrong with using two sentences, but this one, the complex sentence is more meaningful, and it will give you more marks if you can learn how to use them. Okay. Now, this is an exercise. Using the previous examples, transform sentences 1 and 2 to make each one a single participle clause sentence. I mean, a complex sentence with a participle clause. There may be, of course, more than one possible answer. The first one says, young people are greatly excited by social media. They believe that it's a necessary way to keep in contact with their friends. 2, some people argue that social media is the perfect tool for modern communication. They draw attention to the fact that family members and friends often find it impossible to spend time with each other. So I want you to pause the video and to try to study the previous slide. You need to differentiate between using a passive verb and an active verb. Okay, because these are for an active verb we use the present participle, and for the passive verb we use something different. So I want you to go back to the previous slide and try to study it. Okay, then come back here and pause the video and try to do this exercise on your own. Okay, now let's look at the answer. Okay, for these two examples here, it says young people are greatly excited, okay, by social media, believing that it's a necessary way to keep in contact with their friends. Here I removed they believe with, of course, I put a comma in place of the full stop because I'm creating one complex sentence, and I used the present participle to connect these two clauses now, not sentences. Believing that, of course, it refers back to young people. We have the same subject for the two sentences. Okay, so believing that, it means that young people believe. It's practically the same. Believing that it's a necessary way to keep in touch or in contact with their friends. Or I could build the sentence differently. Greatly excited by social media, I removed the subject from the first sentence, then I placed a comma. Young people believe that it's a necessary way to keep in touch, in contact with their friends. Okay, so I removed, you can remove the subject in the first sentence or the second sentence, because you are trying to combine them into one complex sentence using the participle clause. The second one, some people argue that social media is the perfect tool for modern communication, comma, drawing attention. Okay, I removed they draw attention and I removed they. I removed the subject of the second sentence and used the participle, the present participle, because it's an active verb here in the second sentence. And of course, I have to use the comma because I'm connecting two sentences, actually two clauses, to make one sentence. If I use the full stop here, then I'm actually building two sentences. If you replace the comma with the full stop and say drawing, then you are making a mistake. It would be a grammatical mistake. Okay. Or I could say, I could start with the second clause, drawing attention to the fact that blah, 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 comma, some people arguing. So it's the same, but you can invert the clauses. That's it. There is nothing wrong with that. Okay. So this is our discussion about participle clauses. Okay. This is the third paragraph written with although and the participle clause. With this in mind, it seems logical to suggest that the positive sides of social media are more significant than the negative. Although it's possible to argue that it has created a society in which people spend less face-to-face time with friends and family, social media has revolutionized revolutionized the way in which we relate to one another. It's easier than ever to keep in touch with old friends, to post pictures of exciting moments in our lives, or to send, of course, this is a list, or to send a quick message to parents. Most people would not welcome a return to an old-fashioned style of communication, being more accustomed now to this convenient way, a new form of interaction. I'm sorry. So here being is the it starts the participle clause, the present participle clause. Okay, and although is the discourse marker. Okay. Now this is the essay so far. Okay, I want you to pause the video and try to read this essay, the introduction and the answer to the two questions, these two paragraphs. Read it carefully, try to analyze it. Okay. Now for our last exercise, decide which option A, B, or C is the best conclusion for this essay. The first one says, in conclusion, social media has proved to be a success because people greatly enjoy the benefits it brings, adapting their approach to friendships and family relationships in order to maintain and improve these bonds in new ways. This is clearly more of a positive than a negative development. So I'm giving my opinion in the conclusion too. Or in the conclusion, I would argue that there are more positive than negative aspects to the effects of social media on our friendships and family relationships. Or three, in conclusion, there are too many reasons to outline in a short essay, both in favor and against social media. So perhaps it's better simply to stay neutral. Both positives and negatives are roughly equal. Which one do you think is the best conclusion for this essay? If you are not sure, you need to go back to the previous slide and read the essay, the introduction, the first answer to the first question, and the second paragraph, which answers the second question. Then come back and try to make a decision, take a decision. Okay. Now, let's see. Obviously, the conclusion A is the best. It clearly restates the answers to both questions in the essay. Conclusion B only answered the second question in the essay. It doesn't sum up the reasons for social media success. And you have to summarize the two questions in your conclusion. Okay, don't just summarize one of the two questions. Conclusion C also focuses on the second question, and in fact, it contradicts the points made in paragraph 3 about social media being on the whole a positive development. So it's not a really good conclusion. Okay, so here is the essay. I want you to read it as many times as you want. Try to underline this time, not just the cohesive devices. I want you to underline the participle clauses, like arguing that people spend too much. Okay, is this a participle clause? Can you think that this is a participle clause? Okay, or something like, of course, in the past, this is a cohesive device. Despite the fact this is a complex sentence, but of course, it's not a participle clause. Okay, here we have although. Okay, so I want you to underline these expressions. And I want, for your homework, I want you to use these expressions. Use despite the fact that, although, use one or two. It depends on of course, on your essay, how you write it. Use one or two participle clauses. Okay, and please answer the question. Arguing that people spend too much time staring at screens rather than actually talking to each other. Is this participle clause? Is there a mistake in this introduction? Okay, maybe there is a mistake. I want you to think about it. Okay, And this concludes our discussion for today's lesson. We still have actually one more session, one more writing session, and then we have one last session. It's like general advice about the whole 4 skills and the course and how you can go from there. I hope you've enjoyed our lesson today, and goodbye, everyone.